While there are great maps in the 20-year history of the Battlefield franchise, there are also others that are dramatically imbalanced, poorly laid out, or simply disasters of design. This is the story of the worst maps of Battlefield. As we move further into the worst map series, I'd like to take this opportunity to state 3 things. 1. I love Battlefield Vietnam. It is one of my all-time favorite Battlefield games. 2. Battlefield Vietnam has one of the highest proportions of great and mid-tier maps in the entire series. And 3. I fucking hate Operation Irving. In its attempts to realistically demonstrate the disparity of US air power, the distant US main features 2 Huey gunships, 1 Chinook transport helicopter, and 1 F-4 Phantom jet. The NVA team has no air vehicles whatsoever. Flying over a large lake to reach the enemy, the visual reference to the Ride of the Valkyries scene from Apocalypse Now is undeniable, complete with the school courtyard to the extent that even a game trailer was built around it. Before we even talk about the map layout, let's discuss air power in Battlefield Vietnam. The F-4 Phantom is here to drop napalm. That's it. It largely can't do anything else with its primary heat-seeking missiles. It can deliver 3 sorties of a massive AoE cone of fire before needing to resupply. Every enemy hit, or even allies when friendly fire is enabled, burns to death with the slightest touch. When enemies are clustered, which they frequently were on Irving, the result was devastating. The 2 Huey gunships had a pilot seat which fired alternating dumbfire rockets, and a gunner seat which had access to dual autocannons and a grenade launcher. The Chinook heavy helicopter, far more armored than the Hueys, had a pilot seat with dual autocannons, but more notably a gunner seat with dual firing rocket pods and a grenade launcher. The autocannons on each killed enemy infantry quickly and damaged light vehicles. But the kicker was the rocket pods. Owing both to Battlefield Vietnam having a low player health pool and high damage for the missiles, these things were godlike killing machines. We are talking about chimpanzees with a mouse button strong. Like Battlefield 5, BF-109 aim at the ground and laugh overpowered. If the chopper so much as looks at you funny, just take your hands off the keyboard levels of pain. They one-shot infantry easily, and two-shot most vehicles, which usually could not aim high enough to counter anyway. On Operation Irving, one could argue that there were anti-air weapons. Sort of. First, the NVA had one ZSU-57 mobile AA at the courtyard flag. This hilariously bad vehicle could only fire its slow flak gun while a player was in the second seat, meaning it was parked most of the time while firing. The gunner was also exposed in the seat, making them vulnerable to the splash of an incoming rocket or any other stray bullet trained at their head. You didn't even need to kill the damn thing, not that they were hard to eliminate anyway. The most significant counter to the air power was actually infantry, as the NVA was the only team in the game to get equipable SA-7 AA shoulder-fired rockets as part of the anti-tank kit. But these heat-seeking rockets had to be lined up on a linear target path, meaning that if a chopper or jet so much as moved, turned, rotated fast enough, or listed lazily to the left, the projectile would miss. Moreover, this rocket, useless against infantry, was the class's primary weapon, which only provided a pistol, knife, and TNT as its other options. This meant that once the US team took a flag, or hell, even prior, many players just refused to use it. As a result, Operation Irving was almost comically an exercise in one-sided obliteration, which only got worse as the round went on and players became more concentrated. There is an argument that a scenario with one-sided air power would work in Battlefield Vietnam, as it sort of did on a few select occasions, but Operation Irving's map design throws that possibility out the window. In fact, I'll call it completely asinine. Operation Irving is a 4-flag map. Well, no, technically it's 5 flags, and the layout is as follows. 4 pre-captured NVA flags make up the main battle zone. split between two adjacent peninsulas in the north. The furthest northeast flag is the Temple Ruins, a large complex confined to its dilapidated square walls. Despite its size, cover in the area is limited, especially inside. The flag sits toward the eastern wall with a small capture radius. The temple is located atop a large hill, defining this part of the map. Defensive fortifications sit outside the west wall looking into the valley. These include 2 pack stationary artillery guns and even a log trap, which, when triggered, can kill infantry and even armor. Inside the temple, a rocket truck vehicle spawns, as does one of 2 NVA tunnel entrances. For those unfamiliar with Battlefield Vietnam, the tunnel entrances are essentially movable NVA bonus spawn points. Using the engineer class, players can pick up the tunnel using the shovel, and place it down anywhere else on the map by digging another entrance. These can be destroyed by enemy players and often takes long periods to respawn. On the opposite peninsula at the northwest end of the map, another strikingly large hill can be found, far steeper than that by the temple. So steep, in fact, that there are unique ways to reach it. A manageable slope on its right face can be scaled by players, though almost without any cover to speak of. The second method of scaling it led from the village, where a covered trench winds its way up to the adjacent hill, and a wooden footbridge allowed you to cross and access the artillery hill objective on the opposite side. This bridge is hilarious, not only because it left players completely exposed, but it was in total contrast to the protected path to get up that far. The objective at the top of the artillery hill was, at least in theory, highly defensible. The flag radius was very small, and, as its name implies, a pair of gun batteries sat aimed at the village below. Spawn points were excruciatingly bad, as their limited number always placed you near the flag and ready to be insta-killed if there were enemies nearby. Nestled along the coast downhill, the village is the most asset-filled location on the map, with temple objects, raised huts, and a stone courtyard which houses the flagpole. Rocks and assorted flora provide extra cover. As a result of the protections available, this was typically the most active objective to fight over, or rather, the one which was the least infuriating. And why is that, you might ask? Because the final NVA starting flag is this ludicrous bridge spanning the large river, or more accurately, the dead center of it, where a tiny island is placed for some sadist's amusement. The flag capture radius is mostly on this tiny island, but does extend just on top of the bridge a bit for players and armor to be able to capture, whenever the hell that might actually happen. There is no cover on the bridge, or most of the beachfront on either side for that matter. On the island, there is only a single large rock on which to prey. When the US team manages to capture one of the peninsulas, the most absurd, long-range battle takes place, and so does excessive spawn camping. For you see, the spawn points of the bridge flag are among the dumbest, most WTF placements that you will ever see. And here are most of them. Yes, there is even one in the dead center of the bridge. It's like a setup for a Looney Tunes Wile E. Coyote joke. These spawn locations were tailored to actually encourage the bridge fight, as most were on the right bank, where the temple was easy pickings. Only 2 rare spawn locations actually placed you on the west bank with little chance to accomplish much. These are so exposed that explosives, vehicles, snipers, heck, even the extremely accurate aim of the assault rifles just wiped everything off the map instantly. Humorously, a tank would spawn for the controlling faction only on the east side. This was usually either dead on arrival from infantry coming down from the temple, or captured by the enemy team and used to fire at respawning players. This objective, and the frequent fight over the river, was insanity. Making matters worse, players not intending to use the bridge were forced to swim to the tiny island, and do so slowly, without any cover, and without the ability to shoot back. Enemies on the opposite bank found good target practice in this, but you absolutely could not miss enemies swimming toward the island if you were already waiting there. Whew, breathe, gravity. A fifth and final capturable objective is actually the US main, located on the peninsula out across the bay. This is highly unusual, given that 1. The map feels like it's Conquest Assault, but isn't, 2. It lies a substantial distance away, and 3. The NVA have no boats or helicopters. This fact did not stop some players from taking a long swim across the bay, up and over this small landmass, through the river again, all for a capture attempt on a flag that intentionally takes far longer than normal. These attempts were almost always in vain, usually because the US aircraft would spot the swimmer before they made it across, or any US camper that wanted to fly the next helicopter was waiting around to sound the alarm. With certainty, the brave NVA soul who made it work was carrying one of the tunnel entrances and would place it in the brush behind the US hangar, allowing the rest of the team to spawn there. Even then, stars would need to align, like the US air power being piloted by noobs or the completely brain-dead players in the base not noticing the ongoing attack. On that absurd occasion, it would deprive the US of all their air power, and yet gain the NVA none. But that was an extreme rarity, and in most games the US maintained air dominance, although I still think that's putting it lightly. As mentioned earlier, 1 F-4 Phantom, 2 Huey gunships, and 1 Chinook spawned here. 1 PT boat was placed in the river, for those looking to journey by sea or who just missed the air transports. Near the airfield, a Sheridan tank and US Air Cav crate could be found. The Air Cav crate was the US equivalent of the NVA tunnel. It was a mobile spawn point and resupply station. To be put into use, both of these assets would need to be airlifted across the bay, which could often have amusing results with inexperienced pilots. Given the high terrain and protection of the temple walls, this was the best landing site for the Air Cav box, and this objective would be in US control in short order. The overwhelming air power of the US side usually drew so much attention early on that infantry capturing flags would be missed. Once a deadlock over the bridge ensued, all infantry suffered. Unfortunately for any players on the NVA side, the nightmare would only get worse. As teams clumped up fighting for the bridge, the courtyard, the temple, or the artillery hill, the aircraft had almost free reign. The napalm of the Phantom was brutal, able to engulf entire objective zones, especially the artillery hill. And when one did get shot down, quick respawn times meant that they would resume the destruction in short order. Finally, if all NVA flags were captured, they could still spawn from the tunnel entrances if they were still open, meaning the whole team would be in one place. This is pure hell, when you consider that the napalm, if dropped on the tunnel, would often not kill it, allowing more enemies to emerge and instantaneously burn. The dynamic of bombing an enemy into oblivion might be great in terms of all-out warfare, sure, but as far as enjoyable gaming experiences go, not so much. On Irving, the strength of the air vehicles in Battlefield Vietnam and simplicity to use them is like a child using fireworks to destroy bugs because Dad couldn't find his magnifying glass. I have no problem with strong air vehicles. Heck, one of my favorite Battlefield maps of all time, Flaming Dart, is full of them. But like in Flaming Dart, you need many vehicles on both sides to keep the power and frequency of the weapons from hammering ground targets 24/7. Alternatively, a larger map environment to spread air vehicles out would allow them to be targeted individually, while far better anti-aircraft abilities and mechanics on the receiving side are potential solutions which might allow such vehicle asset disparity. Operation Irving attempts to demonstrate US air superiority against an unequipped enemy. As a result, it is an example of asymmetrical map design gone horrendously wrong. With neither the geography nor game mechanics to effectively compensate, the US aircraft are simply overwhelming. But beyond that, the layout is almost unjust in its exposed absurdities. Cover remains limited to the smattering of small huts and primarily to the terrain's tall grasses. If there is one positive to the map design, it is of pure coincidence. Not being Conquest Assault allows the NVA team to maintain a ticket bleed by numerical flag advantage, allowing them to occasionally keep up with the American kill count. In the game's prime with peak player counts, gamers didn't complain too much about the imbalance given the infancy of the series, but it was certainly present. While for more than a decade with low server populations, Operation Irving has been decidedly more forgiving, the prime target-rich environment and insta-kill simulator that it once was still triggers my own version of Vietnam flashbacks.